Thank you for that. Let me ask you a question. What do you worry about the most? And we've all got our own special little areas on that, you know. We can talk in broad general terms about what people worry about, but what do you worry about the most? You ever thought about that? What is your number one worry? Health issues. The older you get, the more that becomes a concern. Anytime you have a little ache, anytime you get, I've got a little lower back pain right now. Well, I've noticed I get a lot of lower back pain now when I never got much lower back pain at all. And so you begin to wonder, okay, am I headed for surgery? Is this a structural problem that's eventually going to have to be corrected? Or did I just, as usual, sleep crooked or lay funny or, jerk a muscle out, and I just got to go through that process again of letting it get better, and it takes longer every time? Those are good questions. And every time we hear about somebody in the congregation that has a health issue, that kind of brings it back up. What else do you worry about? Children. We worry about our children, or let's just say a little broader, let's say kinfolk. We worry about our kinfolk, don't we? In Fred's case, it's been his brother-in-law who's been deathly ill. I know James Daniels, his brother Ray, has been really sick and still is. He's very touch and go. You worry about that. You worry about your kids. You worry about them just, are they going to keep their faith? Are they going to live the way they should? Are they safe? You always wake up every day scared to death. You're going to get that phone call that, we think about. Those kind of things are normal to some extent. But those are things we worry about. Any of you in business, you ever worry about deadlines? Ever worry about deadlines? We had a...
Not anymore.
Yeah, Richard doesn't anymore. Hey, I'll talk to your wife about that. We can take care of that. Give you an example. We had a real nice situation. We were out of school for a week with the bad weather. That was great. While I was out of school, I got something like 11 emails from administrators at our school with assignments. They're not doing in-service on special days now. You know how you used to go in and do in-service and then come home? Well, nowadays it's in-house, ongoing, and so we get these assignments. This is a course. Click on the link below, go there. It'll take you 3 hours to complete it. Do all the exercises. When you're done, get the certificate of completion, upload it, and mail it to me to show me you've done the course. Read this book. Here are 12 questions. Please fill in your answers to those questions on our Google Docs file and file it so that we can all look at each other's answers. Okay, you start feeling. And if you're like me, I'll do all that stuff at one time in about a 7-hour period. I tend to procrastinate, and that's one of the great sources of worry, by the way. Procrastination. I hate doing stuff like that. And if you're like me, when I hate doing it, I don't do it till I have to. And that usually means when I look up and I see the guillotine hanging just above me, and the guy's got his hand on the lever and he's getting ready, you can see his muscles in his upper arm getting tight. It's like, okay, I'll get it done. And the longer you wait and the more you realize that deadline's coming, the more you feel the pressure. And the same thing's true when you're running a business and you've got a 3-week deadline out here when you got to have a facility finished. And you're always worried about, okay, what about the weather? Are we going to get our stuff in? You get right in the middle of it, something breaks, now you got to go back, you got to take it down, you got to redo it, that sets you behind. Can I make? And a lot of times in businesses, you're on a completion contract where if you aren't done by a certain date, then every day after that you're penalized. And when you're trying to run a business in a tough economy, that gets rough. That creates its own set of issues, doesn't it? We worry about
The
this.
economy is also a trying time too.
The what?
A tough economy.
Yeah.
The business is tough.
Well, do any of us ever worry about the state of the country? Where the country is. Where the country's going to be in 2 years, 5 years. Who's going to lead the country? Where are they going to lead the country? How are they going to lead the country? You know, it's easy to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do something else, but then when you get to Washington, and you got 435 guys in this building, and you got 100 guys in that building, and you realize you can do some things, but 98% of what you do ain't going to do it all unless those guys sign off on it. And I can make all the promises in the world. But, you know, how do I fulfill those promises? And that worries people. Do you think a lot of people worry about security? You know, you go to the movie house. Well, there's some nutcase going to pull out a gun and walk in there and start shooting people. And, you know, 20 years ago we looked at that and said, oh, please. Nowadays it's like, hey, that could happen. That could happen. Did you see the thing on the news today, I guess it was. They just arrested some guy. He was developing a plot to go into a Masonic lodge and kill everybody he could find in that lodge. And I mean, he had the weapons, he had the ammunition, he had the plan, he had it all set up ready to go. Thank goodness they just happened to get enough information that they could stop it. But it makes you wonder, you know, how many more fruitcakes are out there that have plans like that and guns in the back room and boxes of ammunition that we don't even know about. Well, it's possible, isn't it? And if you live in Sparta, Tennessee, it's not as scary. You don't think of this as being a place where it's going to happen so much as like in New York or Denver or someplace. But hey, you never know. So we worry about those things. You ever worry about bills? Anybody ever worry about bills? Some more, some less. Depends on where you are, what your bills are, what condition your budget's in, those kind of things. But if you're long on spend and short on earn, that's a big issue for a lot of people in this country. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of people who live basically from check to check and don't know sometimes where the next check's coming from. And people aren't taught very much nowadays how to set up a budget and how to handle a budget as a family. Anything else you worry about?
Doug, Jen and I went on a cruise to Mexico. The tour guide told us that the people make their $4.23 a day.
Yeah, not an hour. That's not minimum hourly wage, right?
A day.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, their standard of living there is not as high either, but at the same time.
Well, now some of them, the people that, where we went, that was on the beach, the upper class had their mansions right on the beach.
Yeah, and you see that, and you see it more in third world countries than you do here, where you really do have the wealthy class and everybody else.
Yeah.
And the wealthy folks live up here along this ridge, and everybody else lives in squalor.
You can rent one of those houses, those mansions, for a month for $1,000.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? So there is a lot of, it makes you think.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. You and me, hey, we worked that out.
Yeah.
We worked that out. Why do we worry about things? You could say, well, it's our nature. I don't necessarily think that's true, because there are cultures in which people just don't seem to worry about a lot of that stuff. And I've been kind of kicking this around. This is what's been bothering me the last few days, is trying to process the question of, okay, what are the sources of worry? And somebody says, well, you just named them. Finances. I don't think any of that's the sources. I think those are the triggers. But what causes us to worry? What drives that need to worry about all these things?
Lisa and I discussed this a lot. Faith, weak faith. Some people have more faith, stronger faith, they put their faith in
Okay,
God.
faith is.
They don't
yeah.
worry about things because what's going to happen is going to happen.
Okay. I want to come back to that, if you'll keep that in the back of your mind, because I do want to come back to our understanding or our concept of God, I think has a lot to do
Well, that's what I was gonna,
with the question of worry.
either a lack of or too much knowledge of.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like they're opposing each other, but those are the two things that generate, that the ones that you said, you know, they're over here and they have nothing. Well, there's no knowledge of what could be, so therefore,
Yeah.
you don't have a worry
You
about
don't miss steak if you never had it.
it. Yeah, steak doesn't
It's
exist.
like, what is that? Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we can't control.
Now you're hitting at what I'm thinking about.
And
Yeah. Things we can't control.
if we can control it, then, you know, there's an alternative to worry.
If you can control it. I think control is a huge part of this equation. Because we like to have control. Now, in many parts of the world, as you say, there's not a lot of worry because there is no control. Here's another word that comes up a lot. Expectations. Expectations. If you have low or no expectations, you don't have any need for or concept of control, and therefore you don't worry about anything. How can you worry about, you don't worry about it because nothing you can do about it anyway. Just go with the flow and let it happen and deal with it. If it happens, you deal with it. If it doesn't happen, great. So much the better. Maybe you have a peaceful day. That's a lot of it. And especially when you grow up in a Western culture like ours where control is a big issue. Because as Westerners, as Americans, as wealthy people, and we are, compared to most people, compared to the guy that makes $4.25 a day, we have a lot of control. We're one of the few places in the world we can pick what we wear. We can pick what we drive, we can pick where we live, we can pick where we travel, we can pick when we go. To some extent we have a lot of those things. In a lot of ways you can even, in most of our cases, you can pick where you work, who you work with. We have more or less, but we have a lot of control over our lives. And what terrifies us is the idea that there are areas that we don't have control over. Because the lack of control in a situation where you're used to having control creates insecurity. Makes you insecure. And insecurity is at the heart of worry. Worry is a feeling of insecurity. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's coming next. I don't know how serious it is. I don't know if they have a treatment for me. I don't know if I can get another job. I don't know if the boss likes me or not. I don't know what my kids are going to do. See how that insecurity feeds into that? Now, I'm not sure there's an absolute answer for all of that. But I do think that God points us in some directions. Now, it's easy to look at the passage that says, worry about nothing. And then beat the tar out of ourselves and say, well, I'm going to go to hell on that one if I don't go to hell on anything else. If God doesn't give me on anything else, He's going to give me on that verse. I'm gone. I'm done. If there's ever a place where I need grace, where grace is more than sufficient, it's got to be in this worry about nothing. Because I ain't going to make it on that one. I think it's true of most of us. We don't look at the whole passage, though. It's easy to quote a part of a verse and beat somebody up with it. Because when Paul says don't worry about anything, but he gives you an alternative. Before we do that, though, let's back up a minute. What does Jesus say about worry? And this has to do with control. Have you ever looked at that in Matthew, in the Gospel of Matthew?
All about surrender.
Chapter 6, maybe?
You took and described right there what else, when you asked, what do I worry about the most? And it's truly about being stuck.
Yeah,
Either
we
I'm
worry-
stuck
yeah,
emotionally or
I'm
I'm
rephrasing
stuck
this for our video, but you're
physically.
saying we worry most about being stuck, which means what?
out of control. You're not in control of
Yeah.
what you want to happen or what could
Yeah.
happen.
We like to
or
be
what-
the masters of our own destiny.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we're used to that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Who picked your wife or husband? You did. You had control over that. You know. Who raised your kids? You did. You had control over that. Who decided what sports they played? You did. So, well, I'll let the kids kind of think, I know that, but, you know, we kind of nudge that along and get them to where they need, you know. Who picked the house you live in? I know most of you say my wife. I get that, okay, but if you're married, that means you were in on it too, at least in a passing conversation. Like, we're going to live there. I hope you enjoy that place. Anyway, we are used to having a lot of control. And when we are in situations, you know, when the doctor walks in and says you have cancer, you have no control at that point. You are totally dependent on outside sources. Doctors, medicines, treatment facilities, God.
Miracle, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you know, however, I mean, you're either going to get better or you're not. And you don't have sometimes you don't have a lot of control over that. You know, so that's a big deal. Jesus at the end of Matthew 6, verse 25 says, therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life. Now what does he mean by life? Well, he tells you what you'll eat, what you'll drink, or about your body, what you'll wear. Now we look at that and say, well, I don't worry about that. No, but you know, 98% of the people in the world do. For many, 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 many people in the world, for the vast majority of people in the world, the three big concerns are food, drink, and clothing. The scarcest commodity on earth today is fresh water. If you don't believe it, ask the people in Flint, Michigan. City of 100,000 and they can't get a drink of water. Woman said she made a casserole the other day. It took her 10 bottles of water to make the casserole. And at that rate, you don't make much progress. When you're having to literally bust the water in for everybody in town. All day, every day, all the time. And that's in one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. Imagine South Sudan. A lot of them don't even know what water is. You know? And so, you know, when you talk about what you'll eat, what you'll drink, and what you'll wear, Jesus is talking to people where they live. He says, I'm not stupid. I know this is what you folks worry about. And I think he's kind of legitimizing it in a way. He says, and I get that. But he says, isn't life more important than food and the body more important than clothes? And life here doesn't mean physically living, does it? He's talking about the spiritual life with God. He says that goes beyond that. You can be starving and still be at peace with God. You can be dying of thirst and be at peace with God. You can be all but naked and be at peace with God. I mean, you know, you can at least have that. What he's saying is if you can't have any of the other, at least you can have that.
There's more to life than food.
Well, that's what he says. He says, is life not more important than food? He uses the word important, though. See, he's talking about a hierarchy here, a value system of what matters. He says, look at the birds. You know, God takes care of them. Aren't you much more valuable than they? Who of you, now, this is what who of you by worrying, he's touching on the root cause here. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? In fact, studies are showing again and again and again and again and again that excessive worry and fretting actually shortens your life. It blows up in your face. The people that worry the most about their health are the unhealthiest. And somebody says, well, but they have a reason to be worried. But, usually there's a symbiotic relationship there. It gets them there. And so he says, can you really add anything to your life, either physically or spiritually, by worrying about stuff? And then he says you worry about clothes, but look at the lilies of the field. They don't toil, they don't spin, and yet Solomon on his best day doesn't look as good. And if that's how God takes care of grass in the field, here today and gone tomorrow, thrown into the fire, don't you think he's going to put some clothes on your back? So don't worry saying, what are we going to eat, what are we going to drink, or what are we going to wear? He says, this is the stuff. Now, this is what bothers me. This is what hurts me is when I hear this. Jesus says this is what the pagans chase after. What does that say about me? Well, it says that sometimes I'm flirting with paganism. And your Heavenly Father knows you need this stuff. Seek the kingdom first, His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow. Let tomorrow worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Each day. What did he say earlier in the Sermon on the Mount when he gave us the model of prayer? What did he say to ask for? Give us this day our daily bread. Give us today enough bread for today. And that's a reference, by the way, to the manna, where literally they only were able to sustain bread for a day. And the reason God designed it that way in the wilderness was to remind the people every day, you don't take a step without me. We've talked before about how, it's a gift of God that you even take the breath you're taking. God literally gave them, when they went out to gather bread, when the manna fell, they went out and gathered, they could gather all they wanted, couldn't they? They could gather 15 tons of manna. But the next morning, all that would be good enough to eat is breakfast. The rest of it was bad. Why? Give us this day our bread for today. I think sometimes in our Western culture, we lose the ability, or the desire maybe, to simply live in the moment and be thankful for what we have. Because we're always thinking about what's next, what do you want, what do you need, what are you planning for, what do you save? And we all do it. We just booked a house to go next summer, or this coming summer. We booked a house to go to the beach. So, everybody's talking about, we're going to the beach this summer, we're going to the beach. Marty walked in the other day and says, man, I'm already getting excited. I said, look, I got to go to work. I don't have time to get excited about going to the beach in May. Good grief. I could drive off a cliff between now and May, and you could. So the thing is, and there's nothing wrong. God doesn't say there's anything wrong with planning something well out ahead. What does he say in James? He doesn't say there's anything wrong with saying we're going to go here and do this and do that, as long as it's prefaced by what? If the Lord wills. That's living in the moment. That's being totally open, moment by moment, day by day, to whatever the ever-changing will of God is. This is what I hope happens. This is what I'd like to see happen. But hey, if it doesn't happen, God's taking me somewhere else. I need to submit to that and move with it. I think one of the most important things we need to learn is flexibility and the ability to change your plans. Because it happens all the time. Happens all the time. You get ready to go on a trip, and 2 days before you go on the trip, one of your relatives falls deathly ill, and they don't expect them to survive. Well, the trip's off. Okay? One of our teachers at school, this has been 4 or 5 years ago, he was enjoying his vacation down on the Gulf, down at I don't know, somewhere, Panama City, somewhere down in there. Having a good time. He gets a call from home, says your dad has fallen ill. They don't expect him to live 24 hours. He got in his car within 15 minutes and drove 8 hours back to Monterey to be at his dad's bedside when he passed away. At that point, vacation didn't matter. Everything changed. Everything got canceled. The trip, the little boat cruise they were going to make, the fishing trip, the kayaking, forget it. Daddy's dying, I need to get home. Now, I know this guy well. He's a great man of faith, and he just accepted that. By the way, this same fella, a year and a half ago, walked into the bathroom one morning and found his wife of 23 years dead on the floor. She had gone into a diabetic coma and died. That's a lot to deal with. You think his plans changed? Everything changed, didn't it? Now, those are extreme examples, but plans get changed all the time. All the time. We've got to learn to give up the control. Go with me, if you will. How are we looking? Yeah, we still got a few minutes. Let's go to Philippians. I want you to look at this passage with me. By the way, Jesus says it here. Jesus lays the guilt thing on us here, doesn't he? In Matthew 7. Don't worry about your life. Don't worry about it. Or as some would argue, the Greek says, stop worrying about it, as if he knows you're doing it. So we know we're going to be lost on that passage because he says not to do it, and we do it anyway, right? And then we get over here to chapter what? Chapter, I'll get this in a minute. Let me find it. I had it here just a second ago, and you all got to talking about something, and now you got me all thrown off. Yeah, chapter 4, Philippians 4, verse 4. He starts by saying, rejoice in the Lord always. That's a state of mind.
Amen.
Rejoice in the Lord always. How can you rejoice in the Lord always? It's not always great. Have you ever had one of those not rejoice in the Lord days? You know, a lot of times I have more oh my Lord days than I have rejoice in the Lord days. You ever have those? Yeah. You have those. And yet, can you rejoice in the Lord? Well, it depends on your concept of how life is supposed to unfold. If it's all supposed to be great and it's all supposed to be perfect and everything's supposed to happen just the way I think it should happen and it all just God loves me, and if I belong to Jesus, everything's just going to fall together, everything works together, everything is good for those who love. He never says that, by the way. But a lot of people read that Romans 8 passage as all things are always good for those who love the Lord. And that's not what it says. It says when God gets done with the painting, you'll look at the front and say, wow, that's beautiful. It does not say that when he's putting the black paint around the edge, you're going to say, that's the prettiest black paint I ever saw. Can you put some more on the picture? That's a different thing. So he says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I'll say rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident. The Lord is near. There is a closeness, an awareness of the presence of God. And then he says, don't be anxious about anything. Now that's even worse. Jesus said, as long as it was that, Jesus says I couldn't worry about my life. Didn't say anything about my kids, did he? See, there you go. I can worry about my kids, I can worry about my dog, I can worry about my wife, I can worry about my business. As long as I'm not worried about food, clothing, and drink for me. Don't worry about your life. But now Paul comes along and he says, don't worry about anything. Oh, come on, give me a break. Why don't you walk in my shoes? I think he probably did. That's the whole point. Don't worry, and notice how he stresses it. Don't worry about anything, but in everything. Which is just the flip side of the coin. Don't worry about anything, flip, but in everything. He says, don't worry about things, pray about them. Don't worry about things, give thanksgiving. Don't worry about things, but make petition. Tell God what you need. Don't worry about things, send your request to God. He says 4 things there. He says in everything by prayer, petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. There's 4 things right there. Do those 4 things and not fret about everything. And the peace of God that transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. How's he going to do that? How's he going to? Did he just promise me that God would fix whatever worries me? Is that what he just did? Did he just tell me that God's going to fix it if it's broke? that if I've got a flat tire, all I got to do is just make my petition known to God and say, Lord, I'm thankful for everything you do for me. Now, if you just fix that tire and get to work on time. Man, I was driving down the road one day heading to Cookville. I think about everything in the world, what I'm supposed to be doing, just like y'all do. I was driving the old Cookville Road because I like the old Cookville Road better than the 111. Except I learned one thing about the old Cookville Road. There's several places on the old Cookville Road where there's big chug holes right on the side of the road that are about that big around and about that deep. And I drifted just a little bit to the right, and buddy, I hit one with that right front tire. It literally blew the tire out and bent the rim. I mean, I was sincere in my travel that day. And I mean, it tore that wheel all to pieces. And you get optimistic. You say to yourself, it's not a problem. I just took a hard hit, but it's okay. I'll still be able to make it. And after about 5 feet, and you're going, go up, you start realizing, no, this is not good. Something really bad has happened. Well, now, being thankful and rejoicing in the Lord is not going to fix that. You got to jack it up, take it off, dig all the stuff out of the trunk. You ever had to play that game? Usually it's on a trip. But you have to drag all that stuff out of the trunk and then pull the little skinny mini tires, what I call them, the little skinny mini. You pull that out and you put it on there and you just hope. You hope by the grace of God that it's good. Okay? Mine was. And then you throw that poor mangled thing in the back of the car, and so you immediately have to initiate a search to replace it. That's not a pretty thing. Do you know how much car rims cost these days? Used? Yeah, Daryl can tell you, can't he?
Yep.
And that doesn't count the tire. So after 6 weeks and $200 or $300, mostly in stupid tax, I got the tire fixed. Now, did I feel abandoned by God? No. Sometimes the things that happen are the results of our own stupidity. And in that case, you pay tax on it. And God never promises to save us from our own stupidity. In fact, He promises that what we sow, we will reap. And sometimes, I think about the incident, and it's so tragic with the family here in White County that lost the child this week, or early this week. And that was just, somebody made a very poor decision. Left a person in the car with a loaded gun in it, 4 kids, unsupervised. Oh, but it's just 5 minutes. Hey, 4 kids can dismantle a skyscraper in 5 minutes. Did Mom mean to do that? No. Would anybody ever suggest? No. Was it a really incredibly bad decision? Yes, it was. By the way, every class I saw today at school watched the Eddie Eagle thing about what to do when you see a gun. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell them don't. And my kids have seen it. Every one of my kids have seen it. Well, every one of my kids are going to see it again. Because you just can't stress it enough. And the very thing that I've taught my kids at school over and over again is this. Even if a gun doesn't have the magazine in it, it doesn't mean the gun isn't loaded. Because a lot of times when you put the magazine in, it automatically chambers the shell. And it may look empty, but you won't know until you pull the trigger and then it's too late. And that's exactly what happened in this case. As he dropped the magazine, the gun discharged with the shell that was already loaded. Total accident. And now you've got a whole family that basically has been ruined, has been devastated. I mean, that one little boy's got to live the rest of his life knowing what's happened. Even though it's an accident. Imagine that. Just trying to compensate for that. Trying to come to terms with that. Some things just have horrible consequences. Some things are caused in ways that we don't even know why. Right? Dale, right? Sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes there is no reasonable explanation. That's why it's so important that you keep this understanding. He says, make your request known to God. Why? Because the only one who really knows all the facts and the only one who's really in control is God. If it's not in the will of God, it won't happen. If it is in the will of God, it'll happen no matter what. Isn't that what Revelation teaches us, if anything? If God doesn't want it, it won't happen. If God does want it, all the powers of Satan can't stop it. All the kings of the earth can't stop it. God will just roll it out anyway. I don't always understand those things. But I find that the more I release a lot of those things to God, and the more I take the attitude that no matter what happens, I'll just deal with it in the context of life and trust God and my brethren to get me through it, the better I sleep at night.
Amen.
Not because everything's great, not because there aren't causes for concern, but because I've got a sense of, at least in one dimension of life, I've got a handle on things. I really have grown through the years to believe that God and I can get through anything. And that's important. God and I can get through anything.
That's become an expectation through.
That's become an expectation that does not get disappointed.
Amen. And even though it doesn't turn out the way I think it should, because I didn't really know what to expect.
That's my expectation.
That's right. Because in reality, when you go before Him in prayer and you make a request and the supply comes, somehow that transformation of Him going, yeah, we're working on that. We got this going. Don't worry about it. And suddenly your expectations are pulled back.
Yeah. My expectations are generally selfish. They're generally short-sighted. And they're generally uninformed. In many cases.
With some severe consequences.
Yeah, with some severe consequences. Now, let me say this. And George kind of touched on this earlier. There are a lot of things in life we do have control over. And when we have that control, God's expectation is that we exercise that control.
Absolutely. Amen.
You have control over whether you're saved or not. I mean, that's next. God has the expectation that all men be saved. He tells you how to do it. But the rest of it's on you. God teaches us how to relate to people. God teaches us how to build effective homes. God teaches us, in some ways, how to raise children the right kind of way. God teaches us what kind of workers we should be and what kind of work ethic we should have. God teaches us in His will how we should approach human government. Among other things, in terms of our expectations. Okay? God tells us a lot of things that He then gives us control over and says, okay, keep in mind the parable of remember the three guys that got the gold talents? One got 5, one got 3, and one got 1, or one got 5, one got 2, and one got 1. The minute he handed those talents over to them, guess who had control?
They did.
Yeah. Yeah. If God calls you to a job, it's yours. If God gives you a gift, it's yours. If God opens the door of opportunity, it's yours. Now what you do with it's up to you. And there will be an account. So, it's a balance. It's a balance between trust and responsibility. The key in life is to learn which is which. What is the saying they use in the AA meetings? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things, the wisdom, the wisdom's the last thing. It's the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the ability to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And most of us flunk that on number 3.
instead of serenity, I've changed that to ability.
Okay. Okay. That's-
It makes more sense to me.
God, give me the ability.
Yeah.
You're praying for God to give you the tools,
Yeah.
support system, the inner strength. That's fine. But the thing is, you have to learn to accept things you can't change. And the key to happiness in life and the key to success in life spiritually is you got to know the difference between what you can control, what you can't. There's a lot of things in life I can't control. There's nothing I can do. Somebody says, "Oh, I'll never fly on an airplane." Airplanes crash all the time. First of all, airplanes don't crash all the time. In fact, one reason they go to the top of the news is because it's such a rare occurrence that when it does happen, it's just like, "Oh, that's weird. Let's put that on the news." If they crashed all the time, they just say, "Well, in further news, another plane crashed today. Now let's move on to the next important story."
Cars crash all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
But before we run out of time, back to holding my thought, faith. As we grow in our faith, we get stronger as Christians. As we study, as we get more and more faithful.
Okay. As we grow in our faith.
Yeah, as we grow, we get the Spirit within us. We get that peace that that He tells us that's all understanding. And with that, and the fruits of the Spirit, what? Love, joy, peace, all of those things come. And
So you're saying that as we nurture our lives
yeah,
in Christ, we also nurture the influence of His Spirit in our lives.
right.
And that way you open yourself to His influence more and His ability to control
Yeah.
your uncontrollable feelings.
And you don't worry as much. You don't worry about things. And things that you used to worry about seem they're not significant anymore. It's like,
Another thing related to that, I think, is understanding feelings and how they affect us, and understanding that feelings don't always represent reality. That how I feel may not be how I am. It's just how I feel. And feelings change. The thing you have to learn about feelings, and this is very important, the key to feelings is not learning how to change feelings, but how to manage them. The Bible never says it's a sin to get angry. God says be angry, but don't sin. That means God acknowledges the feelings. That anger is just a feeling. There are times when there are times when you should get angry. When Jesus walked in and saw the violation of the temple of God, He flew off the handle. He went crazy. He got mad because it offended Him, His sense of spiritual right and wrong. And He did the most extreme thing He ever did in His ministry. He took a little stick and He ran people out. Now, it doesn't say hurt anybody, but He ran them out. He was just overcome with passion for God. So you can be angry. I tell my kids this at school, you can be mad, you just can't hit somebody. You can get mad at your teacher, you just can't cuss her out in front of everybody. Dude, no. And so, one of the great challenges is learning the skills of management. And that, by the way, is what the Bible calls and talks about all the time. It's what, Richard? Self-control. Self-discipline. Right? Why do we tell our kids, you don't talk that way, you don't talk that way, you don't talk that way, you don't, all right, gonna wash that mouth out, you nasty mouth kid, you, come here. Wash it out and spank them and send them in timeout. Why do we do that? So that hopefully later on when the kid gets older and is in a stressful situation, he doesn't feel like he has the right to use that kind of language, because that kind of language is wrong and is inappropriate. The purpose of discipline is to instill self-discipline. Kid sneaks out in the car one night, stays gone 2 hours, he gets home, you take away the key and pull his license for 6 months. You aren't doing it because you don't like the kid, you're doing it to teach him a lesson so that the next time he thinks about sneaking out without permission, he's not going to do it. Now at the same time, the other side of that coin is you can't fix stupid. Sometimes people are going to do what they're going to do no matter what, right? That just happens.
life is a test,
Life is a test, you're right.
and we're constantly being tested. And the older we get, hopefully, we can pass those tests.
Yes, and that's what James says, isn't it? James says to count it joy when you come under the test, because it gives you a chance to prove your faithfulness. Now, what a difference that would make in temptation if that's the way we look at it. You don't invite temptation, but when temptation comes up, if you were to look at it as, oh great, God's given me a chance here to show him faithful. Instead of, boy, that looks tantalizing, that might be fun. See the difference in there? It's a difference in attitude. I don't know if this helps anybody or not. We're out of time, but I don't know if that helps anybody or not. But this whole thing about worrying, a lot of it has to do with our sense of I should be in control. We're not. God's in control. We need to learn to trust him and listen to his guidance, because he gives us a lot of teaching on how to handle our side of that in a proper way.
Some say the devil is in control.
Well, the devil would like to be in control, wouldn't he?
Some people
And he is in some things and with a lot of people, but, having finished a 2-year study of Revelation, took us 2 years. I don't know, I hope we got the message over a 2-year period. He's not in control of anything. He is unchained for a time. He is permitted for a time.
I can let him.
You can certainly let him. When I walk my dog, and I've got a big old I got one of them leashes that's about that big around, because you have to with her. And that thing's probably 15 foot long. And we'll be walking along, and as long as she, kind of doing what I want her to do, I'll let her go. I'll hold that thing and just let her go. She'll go down along the edge of the road and down in the grass down there, and I don't mind. But now, if it's cold outside, the wind's blowing real hard, and it's time to just get done and go in, that leash comes up about that long. Okay? All of a sudden, I don't have no 15-foot leash. I got about a 3-foot leash, and we're right there like that. And the minute she's done, I say, come on, and I jerk. There's times in life when God will jerk your leash. But more often than not, he'll let you run as long as you're willing. He'll let you run. Just see where you go. The more you learn to trust in God, the more he'll jerk your leash when you get out too far. Pull you back this way. My dog would love to go back in that field and chase them donkeys. But if she did, there wouldn't be nothing left of that dog time I got to her. The donkeys would take care of her business. She hates them things. She'll stand up on the road and just bark at them, real tough. They just stand there and look at her like, yeah, whatever. Not the least bit afraid of her. But if she starts running that way, I just plant both feet and hold tight. Because at the end of 15 feet, she's getting spun. She does she doesn't do a 360. She does about a 500 something, 540. Yeah, she go all the way around, halfway around again. At that point, she loses interest.
In sports and in life, you learn more from losing
Oh, yeah.
than you do winning.
Oh, yeah.
Right, Dillard?
Tell it to Tom Brady.
Yeah.
No, that's true. It's true.
You learn about
That's why they say a lot of times the hardest thing to do is sustain a winning streak, because the more you win, the more careless you get, and the less you continue to focus on the things that got you there.
Yep.
And it's right after that first loss is when the old coach can take them back and say, see, you're not near as good as you thought you were. Now, you want to go back and learn how to play this game, or you want to keep getting beat? And at that point, they're more willing to listen. And if you think about it, a lot of times when we have made our biggest mistakes in life or fallen the hardest in life is when we've been most willing to listen. Because then we realize that we really aren't in control and we need some help. So that can be a good thing. Let's close. I'm sorry.
One other thing.
Okay.
When you're losing, when you're down and out, that's more times that you talk to God.
Yes. Yeah. It shouldn't, we say you shouldn't just go to God when things are tough, but you should.
Well,
And that's when you go.
yeah,
Yeah, that's when you
we
go.
needed the most then.
And God understands that. He kind of pats his little back and says, yeah, I know. You ready to listen now? Yeah. You notice when Elijah was at his lowest, God didn't shout at him. God just came to him in a still small voice and said, all right, son, you ready to go back to work now? You ready to hear what I have to say? Well, I guess, yeah. And that's where you start. Let's close with a word of prayer. Father, help us to manage worry in our lives. Help us to be wise. Help us to have the wisdom to know the difference between things we can and cannot control. And Father, give us the strength to do the right things, to trust in you. Give us the ability to bear up under those things which we cannot control, to be flexible, to be wise, to be open-minded. Help us always, Father, no matter where life takes us, no matter which branch of the road we go down, help us always, Father, to keep our eyes on you and on the cross and on the way that's prepared for us by Jesus, because we know, Father, that when we do that, everything will come out just fine. Watch over us and take care of us and keep your Spirit alive within us. And, Father, give us that jerk on the chain when we need it. We ask it in Jesus' name. And his people say, Amen.